It was an early autumn morning, a day that had started out sunny and gradually became cold, cloudy, and windy with hints of rain. Melissa had just gotten off the phone with Kristen, the woman who was one of her closest confidantes. Kristen was nearing retirement age and loved to interact with young women. It helped her relive her youth, and she loved living someone else's life, listening to the stories of her young friends. With Melissa, they had an almost filial relationship, only with less judgment and, for that matter, encouragement to be more open and even naughty. Kristen knew Melissa for more than just her hard work as a competent part-time secretary in a law office. She knew that Melissa's main concern was raising her baby, and the rest of the time she was a patient and lonely housewife. Kristen knew Melissa's personal life in detail, her frustrations with being a lonely wife to a husband who was mostly absent, including her sexual needs that were not met even when he was around. Kristen often gave advice and felt that Melissa was on the edge, both in her marriage and in her hitherto repressed sexuality. Melissa stood in front of the mirror, deciding what to wear. It was a secret first date, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to go on it. Her figure, at 5 feet 4 inches, was an hourglass figure, although she definitely had a mom figure. Her full B cups almost became small C cups with the weight she gained after pregnancy. Although she was able to stop further weight gain through frequent cardio workouts at the gym, she was unable to return to the girlish figure she enjoyed in college. At 26, she still looked a little younger, not like a college student, but more like a graduate student straight out of undergrad. Her body was more toned and slender than that of girls younger than her who had not yet given birth. Her long, naturally wavy, medium brown hair fell past her shoulders, almost reaching mid-back in some places. Her hair was thick and her eyes were a dazzling blue, perhaps her best feature, insightful and dreamy at the same time. Overall, she was what most men would call pretty, and many would consider beautiful, with perfect teeth and slightly fuller lips than the average woman. Now she stood naked in front of the tall mirror in the bedroom, deciding what to wear. "I'm not going to do anything indecent on the first date," she promised herself, so choosing a matching set of pink cotton bra and cute cotton bikini panties was easy. Both items had matching dainty white bows in the center. After she put on the bra, her big B or small C cups looked much slimmer. Usually her breasts looked heavy, although not sagging. In the bra they had the firmness of a second-year student. Her waist remained slender, as did her legs, but her hips became fuller, and she blushed, remembering that Stan had called her a pog after seeing her pictures on the website. But it was true, her butt was round, but still a mother's figure, round and full. She had slight cellulite on her thighs and butt, as well as a few subtle stretch marks from her pregnancy. Her hips were wide and quite high, making her waist thinner than it would be at her weight and height. She showered thoroughly and styled her washed and dried hair into a high ponytail with a white elastic band before calling Kristen. Kristen insisted that Melissa dress cute, with a touch of sexiness and a lot of sophistication. "No, jeans and a t-shirt won't do, Melissa," Kristen reproached her. "Wear a cute skirt, a sassy top, some sexy, maybe even kitschy heels." Melissa chose an aligned skirt made of lightweight cotton, white with a red floral pattern, mostly roses. The skirt reached above her knees and made her waist look thinner and her butt smaller, in a good way, like the real round butt she had as a student. The skirt was thin cotton, a little sheer, but her panties were only visible in very bright light, and it was already early evening. Its top was tight, peasant cut, and almost perfectly matched in color with the skirt, deep, dark red, velvety. The top ended just above the hem of the skirt, but depending on how it sat, it could expose a small area of abdominal skin. It fit her bra perfectly, and as soon as she put it on, she felt that her hourglass figure looked its best. She had not dressed so elegantly for anyone in a long time. On her feet were white sandals with low heels, which also matched the skirt. Comfortable for this time of year, they were easy to walk in, as the heels were only 2 inches, and they made her small feet look especially beautiful. It was the best compromise between practical and sexy, she thought. Her toenails were pink, as were her panties, and she had chosen the same color of hand polish. her manicure and pedicure were always impeccable. For her, impeccable self-care was not only a duty to her husband and her conviction, but also, when bored, as she often did, she gave herself as much polish as she could. It made her feel better, even though she felt abandoned inside. She bit her lip, looking at her reflection. She looked hot as she started putting on some makeup. Stan didn't like a lot of makeup on women and thought she was naturally beautiful. But it wasn't just him, she reminded herself. She was used to a selfish husband and selfish men in general. Most lawyers at work were needy and demanding men. Melissa's face was such that it looked radiant even without makeup, so she only needed a little. Telling the parents how everyone was doing brought back the response that Mom had nothing to worry about, as the grandparents were happily caring for their granddaughter, who would spend the night pampering her and doting on her so Mom could get some free time and sleep. They had no idea that Melissa was about to leave the house and meet a handsome, unfamiliar man about whom she still knew little. Melissa's parents thought their daughter had the perfect marriage. As for her feelings of abandonment, sexual frustration, and the fact that she was on the verge of possible betrayal, they had no idea. But Stan knew. At first glance, Stan might seem like an ordinary guy. He was of average height, 5'10", and looked masculinely handsome, but in that neighborhood style, often with masculine stubble. His dark hair went well with his toned and tan body. He spent most of the summer working out, applying to graduate schools, and sunbathing by pools. His Mediterranean blood was Italian and Central European, and in early autumn or late summer, he looked dark and mysterious. His hazel eyes were sharp and deep, full of intensity and often thoughtful, but not necessarily in an evil way. He was ambitious, and this was most evident in his eyes. His face was like the face of a Greek god, but still somehow like the face of an ordinary person. He had the appearance of an ordinary guy, but when he was examined more closely, his qualities, physical and otherwise, began to emerge. Many times, after meeting him, women remarked that there is something really attractive about him, but they could never quite explain what it was. Stan had also showered, and his short hair was quite thick and rich. He kept them short for work. He kept them short because he liked the business look. As a firefighter in his early 30s, he rose through the ranks quickly, but he had the mind to advance in life in general. He was a winner, and it showed in his confidence. His MBA application went well, and many of the men he shared a brotherly bond with at the fire station will miss him dearly when he leaves for business school. He was a born leader, in a brave but never foolish way. He always calculated, and it was the same when he decided what kind of lover he wanted. A search that led him to Melissa. In his 20s, he was very successful with girls, and most of them tried to become his girlfriend in one way or another. He either didn't allow it or allowed it for a few weeks or months before breaking up with them. He called it a breakup, but most of them felt abandoned. He charmed them, seduced them, gave them amazing sex, used them for his pleasure, and just moved on. There was always something that required his time and freedom. Excellent grades in college, private research, studying investments, and advancing as a firefighter. He knew that while he liked being a firefighter, he wanted a profession in which he could get rich, a profession that would eventually give him a lot of free time. Working as a firefighter gave him a lot of freedom to study and research, and even while he was working, he completed enough online courses to enroll in an MBA program. The children and wife will wait, he thought, but then someone else's wife, or a woman who won't interfere with the relationship, would be ideal. Grad school was busy, and he had the idea of finding one happy lady who would meet her needs as long as she met him. She will be treated well, but she will also be his mistress, and the beauty of that is that he is free to study, free to work harder, and free to leave at any time if he feels like it. He came up with the idea of finding an attractive married woman with a busy husband or something. He will have a lot of safe sex with a woman who will feel happy with his discretion and his skill. His youthful debauchery was fortunate in the sense that, despite his promiscuous sex life, he was also fortunate to be free of STDs, which he tested before deciding to establish a serious, stable, but non-committal sexual relationship. He knew what he wanted, and even with all his qualities, some women rejected him on dating sites and online because they felt he was serious when he said he didn't want to be open to something that would lead to marriage, not speaking of children. Many of them hoped to secretly catch such a guy and were irritated by his independence. Others were simply stunned by his confidence and the fact that he remained steadfast in his plans to have a relationship purely for sex. There are a lot of fish in the sea and a lot of butts too. I just need to find that same ass who wants to maintain a relationship discreetly and without commitment. But his growing fear of STDs led him to realize he wanted a safe girl. He will change the risky behavior he engaged in his youth in important ways. Stan pulled on silky, comfortable gray boxers, beige trousers, and a stylish black shirt that looked like it was tailored to his broad shoulders and steely, slightly barrel-shaped torso. His chest was hairy, as were his powerful and well-built arms. He looked muscular, his body like a cross between a swimmer and a football player. Wore shiny black shoes just before putting on the Omega, a black watch that was a gift from his parents when he received his bachelor's degree. Stan decided that his date was truly special and that she had all the qualities he was looking for. He decided he wanted to impress her, win her over if they had chemistry, and keep her for as long as it suited them both. She just didn't have to ruin his ambitions of becoming a businessman. He was already involved in day trading and investing, and could be both frugal and generous. He opened Melissa's profile on his laptop again. They met on a singles website, but he knew there were good girls there too. Good girls with tough problems like perfect, smart wives who were neglected by their husbands and overwhelmed by the stress of motherhood, even though they loved their children. There were such bored good girls on the site who needed an outlet. It was Melissa, exactly. When he saw Melissa's profile, all of her photos obscured her face, and her statement quickly communicated that she was a neglected housewife and mom looking for a safe guy for fun. It was only after Kristen insisted that Melissa consider safe and discreet extramarital activities that Melissa created this profile. She bought new clothes for the photos so that her husband wouldn't recognize her, or anyone else for that matter. This was an experiment, and she could back out at any time, and several times she almost deleted it. But she knew that she was not happy, and that underneath it all she had the healthy lust that all young women have. Lust without a way out. Kristen helped her with the photos. Most of them were wearing cute professional outfits, skirts and dresses, tights and soft professional shoes. Melissa cropped her face in the photos, but promised in her profile to show a photo of her face to someone who earns her trust and allows her to be safely vulnerable. When Stan first read her profile, he immediately satisfied himself with her photo. She turned him on a lot, not only because she had a hot figure, but also because it was what he was looking for. He had a weakness for fit mothers, whom time had rounded out a little. Now he needed to see her face. They both lived in the same city, but on opposite ends, which was an advantage for a discreet meeting if everything worked out. After he messaged her, it took her 2 days to respond. She was busy with her daughter, and her husband was soon leaving on a business trip for an extended period of time. She was also inundated with messages, offers, and advances, but as a secretary, she effectively sifted through numerous advances and suitors and settled on just 3 profiles. She rejected one of them because he didn't seem discreet enough in his messaging. The second one rejected her because she insisted on texting for a while before showing her face, and he wasn't patient enough. But she was best able to communicate with Stan. He made her feel attractive, needed, and like a slightly capricious princess. He was very patient and assured her that he understood her, and he was also quick to make it clear that she, in turn, understood him. In a confident and elegant way, he outlined what they would and would not be. This was exactly what she wanted. And it was perfect, exactly what each of them was looking for. One evening, after her daughter fell asleep, Melissa called Kristen to help her decide to send Stan photos of her face. After several minutes of Melissa sighing and nervously playing with her hair, and Kristen hissing like a boiling kettle, it was decided to take a chance, and 3 photographs of Melissa's attractive face were sent to Stan. They were close-ups, and she chose well-taken shots. He replied, "Melissa, join Discord. We can text and talk, and your number will be hidden. But I know after seeing you that I would like to meet and get to know you more." 3 minutes later, she created an account, and they immediately called each other. They had a light correspondence, but the call was completely smooth. Their ease seemed to be on a new level. She felt very safe with him. They did not know each other before and were not part of the circle that could know her. She realized that he was direct and serious when he said that the relationship would be long-term, but without commitment. Anyone could leave at any time and it would be okay. But while he was an alpha, he wasn't a dirty alpha male. Rather, a gentleman and a man of honor. Not only did she feel like she could trust him, she knew it deep down, and every second of that 2-hour first call put her at ease. She was the one who offered him her real number after calling him on Discord. They soon video chatted for almost an hour. He was excited all the time and secretly touched himself sometimes. Melissa often blushed, especially when her chores during a call resulted in her sitting and standing up several times, and she became increasingly aware as she sat down that his sincere smile and intense gaze made her nervous. She didn't feel that way with her husband, or with any man, for a long time. Stan was also shocked to learn that Melissa considered herself anorgasmic throughout the years of her marriage. She was so trusting of Stan that she admitted that it was a lewd self-help book for women and sex toys that led to her satisfying herself in the bath one evening and having her first pleasure. This was about a year ago. I seriously thought that I was in that unfortunate minority of women who could not get pleasure, although I liked sex. Well, I used to like it. Melissa explained embarrassedly, blushing deeply. Stan found her blushing face incredibly arousing. In further conversation, he learned that, despite normal sexual reactions and even a strong desire for sex, her experience was with several lovers, and none of them helped her open up. Sex with her husband was good while they were in love, but it never led to pleasure, and she resigned herself to her sad fate after her research led her to believe that she was simply a hapless medical statistic. Unfortunately, all her lovers were selfish and unimaginative. Dustin didn't use the stable intimacy of marriage to discover what turned him on and become a better lover to her. Unbeknownst to Stan, Melissa had given Kristen lunch and a voucher for a day at her favorite spa as a thank you for inspiring her to make the changes that led to her meeting and now bonding with Stan. "I mean, it's just a date. I can cancel at any time. I know he won't make a scene," Melissa told Kristen. "Expensive? Of course not. I know exactly what this guy wants, and it's not a scandal. Go to meet him calmly, and for the love of God be sexy and open to early fun," was the emotional and encouraging response of her best friend from work. Melissa had no idea about early fun as she tidied up her skirt and climbed into her small but cozy SUV, heading to the Starbucks halfway between her and Stan's house. She wasn't going to spread her legs for him on the first date, no matter how much of a revelation, and in some ways a revolution, it might have been in her life. She was a lady, and even as she approached the place and was a little late, a part of her was still unsure. Her hands trembled slightly, and her heart fluttered. "I can refuse at any time if I meet him, and no sex on the first date. I won't allow that," she thought. Stan didn't think so and didn't care. Melissa was perfect for what he was looking for. Making love to her on the first date would only help him bond with her more and assert his dominance, because he felt that she was very feminine, submissive, and the perfect lover for an alpha male like him. He intended to keep her for a while, if everything worked out. He found her very attractive in that girl next door way. He thought she was probably one of the popular girls, but more of a quiet assistant to Queen Bee than the center of attention. She had a stunning figure, a marriage, and a reputation that she would protect, especially because she loved her daughter and, at least for the moment, was determined to tolerate her husband, whose only virtue seemed to be that he was a rich and reliable provider and someone she fell deeply in love with when they met. Now, years later, she was in quiet rebellion, and Stan would be the one to satisfy her needs. Whether on this date or another, it didn't matter. He also felt that she would be his, and it would be wonderful as long as it was mutual. Stan arrived early and realized how excited he was every time he thought about her slender legs, her pog butt, and her very attractive figure. But her sweet face finally decided the matter, and now he knew that he wanted her. Her quiet voice and refined manners convinced him more and more that she was the lady he was looking for, and perhaps that needy little girl who had not yet been discovered. Time would tell, but he knew he had nothing to lose. While he waited in the car, he parked in a quieter corner deliberately to speed things up, but only if it was done so as not to lose her, but rather to win her and secure her faster. He didn't want her profile to remain active on the site. If this was meant to be, he wanted to get into a rhythm with her as soon as possible so that she could once again focus on her baby and husband when they weren't having sex, and on getting her needs met when they were together. Satisfy her so well that she almost becomes dependent on me, like the girls in college years ago, he thought. He felt that she had a lustful side that had yet to be discovered, a side that he wanted to have for his pleasure and use. Melissa arrived and parked closer to the building. Her heart was pounding, but being the cautious mom she was, she never texted while driving, and when she jumped out of the car and closed the door, holding a fancy beige leather handbag, she texted, "I'm here." He watched her, and she told him she would be in a black SUV, but the parking lot was almost empty, and he quickly recognized her, even though it was almost dark. He saw her looking around for him as he slowly opened the door, then responding with a text, "I see you, beautiful." As she looked around, as it was a windy evening, a sharp gust of wind caused the hem of her skirt to quickly rise and flutter away, mostly from the back. She pulled the hem down with both hands, but not before he saw a flash of her upper thighs, the bottom line of her full ass, and a good portion of the lower third of her panties. During the quick, accidental lifting of her skirt, her body was in a twist, and he could see her butt jiggle with every movement. Although it was only a momentary glance at the fabric, the half-second sight made him think, I might have to keep her panties tonight. She's amazing, and I'm going all in. Melissa was too excited about her upcoming meeting with Stan to fully realize that the wind may have just allowed parts of the parking lot to see her little show. It was a fancy skirt, and she felt a cold gust of wind sweep across her butt, but only for a moment. She was still holding the hem with both hands, the purse strap on her shoulder, when Stan walked up to her. They hugged a little awkwardly, but then both adjusted themselves for a short but closer hug. Stan knew how to hug girls on the first date, and it was Melissa's holding the hem of her skirt at first that led to the awkward hug. She had to let go of the hem, but the timing was bad, and he corrected their hug, but then quickly let go of her to look into her eyes. Even more beautiful in person, he said, winking at her playfully. She blushed and realized that the hem of her skirt was fluttering again, although not as much as the first time, but she quickly held it back and whispered, "Autumn can be so windy." She nervously straightened a strand of hair near her left eye with her left hand and noticed that the left hem of her skirt was threatening to rise again. Stan smiled and gently placed his left hand on her back and led her to the door, opening it for her and eyeing her butt like a seasoned player. What an ass, he thought. The counter was empty, and they ordered 2 cappuccinos, a favorite drink they both shared from their long calls. Melissa had 1 espresso, Stan ordered 2, but when Melissa left, he very quietly whispered to the barista, "Make 3, and winked. Stan was hoping for a long night. The older gentleman behind the counter looked at him blankly and muttered, "Of course." While they were waiting for their drinks, Stan looked around and noticed several low chairs with an even lower table. He wanted not only to look at her legs, but also to see how she sat. He was already studying her every movement. Melissa played with her ponytail a little nervously, but she knew it could be cute and walked forward to the area where the finished drinks were served, thinking that she needed a few seconds to calm down. Memories of a possible, or rather likely, rise in her skirts followed her. But she forgot that she was standing right under the bright LED light, and Stan, attentive as always, slowly approached, smiling, studying her figure, his smile widening when he realized that the skirt was slightly see-through, and that she was wearing what looked like nice girls' cotton bikini briefs, white or pale pink. He wasn't sure as the outline was barely visible. He thought, okay, she's a lady and she's not going to have sex on the first date. Wearing safe and comfortable underwear shows that she does not intend to have sex today. Let's see if we can change her mind. There's nothing better than a good cappuccino on a cold, windy evening. He winked at her as she picked up their order. She held both drinks and opened her mouth to whisper, "Yeah, not a good night for a skirt," but he politely interrupted her, "And your legs look wonderful." He looked at her, slowly making his way like someone carving delicate material, trying to cover as much space as possible without crushing the object, not to mention breaking it. And your lover must make sure you are satisfied. Because it's a simple need. Because it feels good. Because that it's as simple as enjoying a cup of coffee on a windy night. But just as important as being fair and considerate in a relationship. He took another sip. You know where I'm at in life, but if I were him, I would know how to appreciate something that not all men get the chance to have. A good mother for my child, a wife who is patient and caring even during periods of absence, and a woman who deserves to receive the pleasure that her image gives to others. His gaze was direct and sincere, and if his words were meant to be convincing, they were true. She simply blinked at him and pretended to fan herself. God, Stan, you really know how to make a girl blush, she chirped, still fake fanning herself for effect, but then took a sip. But what you say is true. I just feel so insecure, so scared, so depressed, sitting here with a cute guy. She paused to take a deep breath, feeling her chest throb. And sweetheart, of course you are, but we're discussing cheating, what makes me a bad wife, probably a bad person too, at least in some sense. Her cheeks were flushed red, but it was not only from sexual tension, but also from anger at her husband, at her situation, and the fact that she wanted to do something about it, something that she felt was fundamentally wrong. Going back to the way things were meant going back to an emotional void and continuing to have a sexual itch that she desperately needed to be scratched. To continue meant taking the official step of becoming a cheating wife and accepting that once she allowed another man inside her, there would be no turning back. This cannot be undone. I felt very alive, and you brought some excitement into my life, but to be honest, I don't think that, even though I like you very much, I'm ready for this. Her instinct was to stand up and leave immediately. He saw it. She was now struggling with herself. Her cup was sitting on the table, ignored and half drunk. Her eyes were no longer looking at him. She was staring at her bag. She looked like she was about to cry. She seemed completely lost and needy at the same time in salvation. He remembered at that moment why he wanted her. He knew that with another man, perhaps him as a husband, she would be much happier, even delighted. And if she were somehow satisfied as a woman raising a child, and having a husband who, through words and, more importantly, through actions, would show that she is valued. He would make an effort because she was a real lady. After all, he loved submissive women, appreciated Melissa's intelligence, and adored her looks. And he knew that with the right man, she would be a fierce little temptress in the bedroom, sophisticated in most cases, and maybe with the right man to turn her on, a little easy on him in the comfort of their bedroom. But Melissa will not be his wife. It will be some other girl, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 5, maybe in any number of years. He knew that even in the short time over coffee, their conversation had naturally escalated, and now she was panicking and feeling guilty. He knew he had to cement this, take her confidently as quickly as possible, gain her trust and affection, and not let her forget or regret letting him take her at their first meeting. Melissa blinked, smiling, and not allowing the conversation to slow down. Simply because something important was being discussed, she answered, in that moment admiring his confident smile, his strong figure, and the fact that there was something about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on it. But it made her feel calm and secure and needed, and most of all, it made her realize that she wanted him to want her, and badly. Well, I'm here, and I'd also be interested in knowing more about you. The answer was timid but sincere. And apparently my legs look good in this skirt. She giggled. No, they look great, with or without a skirt. He looked at her, slowly testing the waters like someone carefully cutting out a delicate material, trying to cover as much space as possible without splitting the object, let alone to break him, and your lover must make sure you are satisfied. Because it's a simple need, because it feels good, because it's as easy as enjoying a cup of coffee on a windy night, but just as important as being fair and considerate in a relationship. He took another sip. You know where I'm at in life, but if I were in his place, I would know how to appreciate something that not all men get the chance to have. A good mother for my child, a wife who is patient and caring even during periods of absence, and a woman who deserves to receive the pleasure that her image gives to others. His gaze was direct and sincere, and if his words were meant to be convincing, they were true. Melissa, he breathed, answer my question. She was lost in her thoughts and guilt, and his voice brought her back to earth, like someone pulling a kite that was about to fly away. At least for a moment, she leaned back, but her heart was still pounding. Her legs quickly separated and were now pointed away from him towards the door. Yes. Her voice was soft, almost broken. He looked at her. All or nothing, he thought. Critical moment. His voice was firm, and even he himself felt that his confidence was now being tested not only by her, but also by himself, and he spoke. When was the last time you were turned on by the thought of a man wanting your panties, and you want to let him do it? Because life is short, and you need to be happy. She understood the question, but at first she couldn't answer. She muttered it, but it was audible, although quietly. Not since many years ago. She looked like this, as if he was about to faint. What about today? Stan felt his temperature seem to rise. He felt his neck pressure rise. He made his gaze as soft as possible while remaining straight. Yes. She fanned herself with her hand, but this time it was not a fake action. She was red. Her neckline became a deep pink color, and her cheeks were strawberry. I, feel it today, for the first time in years. She breathed, but then continued, but that doesn't mean. Stan was a master of gentle but insistent interruptions. I know what that doesn't mean, so let's get a drink. There's a bar just a step away from here. You don't have to decide anything today, but if you'll let me, I want to help you see what I see for your own good. A beautiful woman who needs love and joy in life. And maybe it can start with us. He exhaled, feeling the importance of the moment. Think about going back to the way things were. Do you want it? Or will talking over drinks help you decide more easily instead of reacting impulsively with guilt? He exhaled again. He was selling this as a business, and he needed to convince her. He's neglecting you. He's letting you down, and you lose by satisfying his selfish needs. So if he can't satisfy yours, find someone who can. There's no shame in that. You are righting a wrong, and as we said, as stated in your profile, no one needs to know about this but us. He said the last word gently, realized that he had played his best cards, leaned back, took the last sip of his coffee, and waited as if listening to her sentence. I need to go to the ladies' room, she said, ignoring her cup but picking up her bag. I'll wait right here. He smiled. He knew she was brooding now, but the toilets were on the opposite side of the front door, so unless she tried to run away outright, he'd at least have another chance to entice her when she returned, although he hoped he wouldn't have to use it. This would probably be a bad sign, and she would disappear and stop communicating with him. And the beauty of Stan's character was that he would go home, have fun remembering the tension of the evening, and launch a website looking for the next girl like Melissa. But for some reason he felt that of all his conquests, this would be the most valuable and the sweetest. Melissa left the ladies' room and was glad that she was alone. She looked at herself in the mirror and exhaled. She saw a beautiful woman who seemed so sad, and it irritated her. As she got dressed and went to the sink to wash her hands, she was still undecided. But that sad girl looked at her through the mirror, and it broke her heart. Stan settled into the chair, taking a relaxed position and taking up as much space as possible. If he was rejected, he wanted to look as confident and strong as possible and make her regret it. But his gut feeling was that although he might not have sex with her today, although he might lose her altogether, she might still agree to drink, and that would buy him time. Although the battle was not won, the worst was over and an easier field lay ahead. Either he would go home, or he hoped the next stage would be a little easier. He needed to win. Melissa's heart was beating fast as she left the ladies' room. She had clutched the car keys in her hand as she walked through the door. But now, looking at Stan, she opened her hand and let the keys fall back into her purse, at least for now. Walking towards him, suddenly acutely aware that she wanted to look good for him, that she still needed him to want her. Her smile was warmer, although terribly shy. "Hello." Verdict. He smiled with a friendly and playful smile. But he knew so well during that smile that he wasn't going to play games. He was here to have sex with her, either at the next meeting or tonight. But his smile was sweet and sincere. If she could read one thing, it was that he was hard at selling it as something she needed, and she remembered that this was the purpose of their entire meeting. She did her best to state that she was not an easy target, and in her mind she was dead set on not having sex. But she responded sweetly, "Just one drink. We're both driving tonight." Stan smiled because he won the next stage, but also knew that she was still holding the line, and her "we're both driving" comment again hinted that she didn't want to go further, at least today. In her submissive but important feminine way, she stated her beliefs and values. They both knew why they were here, but she was his to lose, and he needed to be reminded that if he was going to have sex with her, he was going to have to roll up his sleeves and work a little more. This challenge turned him on. He was ready for this. It was dark outside, but not dark. They quickly discussed where the bar was and how best to navigate the path to minimize crossing puddles from last night's rain or areas of lawn that were undoubtedly muddy and soggy. Melissa noted that even in small heels, the asphalt can be treacherous, and Stan smiled. "But your feet look so beautiful and so very clean." He winked at her as they walked under a street lamp. He went on the offensive again and knew he needed to make her feel good and remind her what she was missing out on. He drove until the building came into view, but when they were a short distance away, she gracefully quickened her pace and leaped forward. Even in the soft light, he again admired her slightly swaying buttocks as her hips gently swayed just a few feet in front of him. It drove him crazy with passion, and he still wanted to hold her hips in his hands that night and watch her buttocks quiver as he took her from behind. Melissa remembered that it was just one drink, that she would keep her composure and never let him think that he had a chance of sleeping with her that night. She wanted to check whether he was ready to invest in the relationship, whether he wanted to win her because she felt submissive, but at the moment not to him personally, but to her intention to go home and have a good cry. As she walked with him through the short but dark stretch of alleys and side streets, she realized that he truly made her feel safe. It seemed to her that he would be a decent lover in their relationship, and some part of her feminine intuition told her that, as independent and strong as he was, some part of him was henpecked, at least for a short time, and this realization was intoxicating to her. The sweetest realization, as she now walked slightly ahead of him at the door of the bar, was that he was probably looking at her ass and thinking about lewd things. She also had her use in him as a tasty revenge for all Dustin's neglect. This rage of vengeance now clashed with the enormous guilt that seemed to haunt her soul. These two forces fought for her mind, her feelings, her thoughts, and her beliefs. At that moment she felt many things, but definitely not boredom. She hadn't felt this alive in years. They rushed into the bar and Stan, always on guard, headed to the quietest spot in the bar. Lucky, he thought to himself, I need space with her, and idle regulars can be curious, talkative, and actively looking for someone to chat with. His left hand again gently led her to the corner of the bar, and she sat down on the outermost chair, placing her purse at her cute sandaled feet, and again performed the same ladylike ritual, straightening her skirt to sit down. He found this feminine ritual so charming and exciting. He liked her femininity and was pleased that her legs were pointed at him again and crossed sexually. He sat down across from her and asked if he could order for them. She hesitated but decided that she would listen to his choice and then change her drink if she didn't like his suggestion. The bartender quickly came over as the bar was pretty quiet. It's a quiet night with so much wind and maybe more rain, so we're going very fast today. What can I get you? He asked. 2 Long Islands, please. Stan looked at Melissa. She thought for a moment, but decided that she wasn't in the mood for beer, and that drinking wine late often gave her an upset stomach, even though she loved drinking it. She considered a martini, but loved a good Long Island and vowed to drink it slowly. They smiled at each other as the drinks were prepared, and they both talked about how efficient the service was. The bartender took the hint and realized that they wanted to be alone. "I'll be back. Call me if you need me." "Tell me about Claire. I'd like to know more." Stan asked about Melissa's daughter, and it caught her off guard. But it was an easy way to have a more casual conversation, allowing her to open up and happily sip her drink while he asked very sincere questions and made sweet comments. He started a new game and hoped it would work, but for now she was chatting and drinking. He did the same. Melissa thought it was very nice of him to ask, and soon she showed him some photos. He was interested and said that Claire was a sweetheart who would one day break hearts like her mom. This made Melissa blush again, but the comment was charming and made her feel good. She said that her daughter is the main source of joy in her life. Claire and Melissa's parents, who cared for her, gave meaning to her lonely life. She then mentioned her job and that it was normal. Melissa felt she could have done more with her life, but Claire was her treasure, and she made it her priority to be a good wife and loving mother. Long Island had a greater impact on her than she expected. She quickly became drunk and felt good. Smooth blues tunes played in the background, and the song she loved, "Give Me a Reason" by Tracy Chapman, came on. At that moment, it seemed to her that she was the woman in the song who had given her husband many opportunities to give her a reason, but he had failed. If it weren't for Claire, she might have thought about divorce, and the thought finally hit her like a revelation. She hadn't consciously thought about it until then. It must have been repressed. But now, as she swayed seductively on the bar stool, her beautiful legs pointed at Stan, she boldly took a few aggressive sips. She looked at him, and her eyes filled with tears. She was about to run to the ladies' room, but he stood up from the chair, put his lips behind her left ear, and whispered, "I'll give you a reason." At that moment, he realized that the woman in the song was singing to the man she loved and asking him to prove his love. Melissa would be singing to a soulless robot named Dustin, so Stan was going to give her a reason, proving to her his desire for her and hinting that she would act to be with him. Her soul seemed to float when she heard him whisper. Then he stood up, his handsome face so close to hers. His left index finger lifted her chin, and he leaned down to kiss her. His kiss was full on her lips. She responded softly but shyly with a light touch of her sensual lips. The kiss quickly broke, and they both smiled a little awkwardly. Stan felt like he might have just ruined everything. She felt her soul bleeding. But the revelation was true. Other than Claire, she had no reason to stay with her husband. Perhaps a little fun on the side and a new outlook on life will save her from the melancholy that has haunted her for years. It might even save her marriage, cause her to confront her husband, demand changes, or threaten to leave. She was the offended party, and that needed to change. Stan thought he had ruined everything, and as he retreated, he looked vulnerable for the first time. "Sorry, that was too bold of me." Seeing him in this light, she now read him better than he read her. He was sincere in his desire for her. He showed vulnerability, and although they both knew, especially she, that this was his dream, she needed him too. She needed it badly, and in this state she began to understand what he meant. They would be lovers, and although her gift to him would be the constant sex he needed, she craved some male attention in her life. But he will also give her the courage to make changes, the courage to realize her worth again. In many ways, she was the bigger winner in this situation, and as she thought about her car keys and her purse, her lonely SUV, and her even lonelier life, brightened only by loving parents and her beloved daughter, she exhaled and simply whispered, "Wow." He looked at her, confused, but she sweetly raised her right index finger, showing the confidence he didn't think she had, and beckoned him towards her. He moved closer, and the next moment they were kissing deeply again. This time her lips were as passionate and accepting as his. He kissed her with desire. She kissed him like a lost soul finding its way. After a heated second kiss, it was Stan's turn to whisper, "Wow." Melissa's glass was empty, and she was drunk. His was empty, and he too was on his way to becoming drunk. I want more, but if I drink one more drop, I won't be able to drive, she smiled, fiddling with her ponytail with her right hand. Can we split one, and I'll take you home in your car? And then call a cab to mine? He suggested sweetly. With as gentle a look as she could, she told him that she could not risk being seen by any neighbor who might see her being driven home by a man whom she would then have to explain to a curious witness or perhaps to her husband if someone will knock. I can't go home today, Stan. I think I'm going to go crazy. I'm also not sure I'm ready to go anywhere with you, so I'm thinking about staying at a hotel, paying for the room with a credit card from the account that I have before marriage. Her eyes were so honest, and again, he could see the confusion and struggle inside her. But then she said something that made Stan breathe a sigh of relief. I know I want to see you again. I'm just not sure how I feel about tonight other than still confused. But you will see me again if you want. I want to see you again, Melissa, said a smiling Stan, ordering one Long Island with 2 straws, but due to a misunderstanding, they brought 2 drinks. She giggled, and they discussed how awkward but also reassuring it could be to spontaneously book a hotel for personal reasons, especially late at night. Melissa stopped when her glass was half empty and she was drunk, but in such a clear, controlled, but completely uncontrollable state. Another drop, and she would be in danger of sliding down the slippery slope to loss of control, and she wasn't about to let that happen. Stan was drunk and wanted her so much that he even felt a little confused about whether he wanted her more than what he originally wanted, some thoughts about his girlfriend clouding his mind. But logic quickly took over and his confidence returned. He won the relationship. He felt there would be a lot of sweet words and tension until the next meeting, probably at his home. Why not try to make it all happen tonight, he thought, if I can. As they finished their drinks, she admitted, I can't lead, and looked at him directly. I'll be honest with you, Melissa, my least hope is that you'll call a taxi after booking a hotel, and we'll set up a second meeting. But I'd want you to be safe under any circumstances, no matter what you decide. Stan looked at her again in that confident yet reassuring manner he knew so well. He continued, my greatest hope is that we get into my car and kiss, and if you still have doubts, I'll wait for your taxi to pick you up, whether it's from my car or yours. And while we're in my car, you might think that while escaping your home will be soothing in itself, you can make that escape much sweeter by sharing it with someone who wants you. His intense eyes sparkled as he said. He continued, I can see that you are hesitant about all this, and I will be frank in admitting that I would like to persuade you to spend the night with me. He exhaled, feeling his pulse quicken in his temples, and continued, his confidence seemed strong, even if inside he felt she was being tested again. And I wish you would decide to let me take your panties, not for anything else, but for your pleasure. For your decision to make a dramatic change in you've been denied pleasure for a long time. Change it tonight, and let me be the man who will lead you to it. I feel that you want me to. What you need is to take one step, and time will show that you chose correctly by taking it. With that said, Stan took the last sip of his drink and winked at her. He smiled, knowing he wouldn't leave the bar a loser, but why not make it a win? I need to go to the ladies' room again, she replied, and she smiled, albeit shyly. Stan needed to pee too. Meet me here, I'll be quick. She smiled, I can be slow. They both stood up and went their separate ways to go to their respective closets. The walk to his car was quick. It was cold outside, and the wind played with her skirt again, this time gently. She asked if he had seen something before when they first met. He admitted to seeing a flash of sexy thighs and a hint of panties. Her cheeks flushed red in the cold air, and for a moment she was speechless, but also very amused by the whole situation, and perhaps even inspired. He led her to his white truck. It was medium-sized and looked old, rugged, but clean and very comfortable. He opened the door for her. She sat down carefully again, taking care of her skirt as gracefully as always. She moved in the seat towards his side and opened the door for him from the inside. When he closed the door, they looked at each other, and for a moment they seemed not to move or breathe. But the next moment he moved closer to her, placing his right hand on her chin and his left on her right thigh, touching the skin where the top of her skirt was high enough to leave a little space above the fabric of her skirt. Their third kiss of the evening was the lightest, as he leaned in and led, and she leaned in and followed. They tasted each other with thirst. When their kiss stopped, their faces moved away just enough for them to look into each other's eyes. The truck was in the farthest part of the parking lot, which now only had 5 cars in it, and they didn't see another soul in the parking lot at the moment. The old truck's light didn't come on while its engine was off, so other than a little light coming from a street lamp about 14 meters away, they could easily see each other since their eyes were used to the darkness. But for someone who was a few meters away, the truck would appear to be empty unless you looked closely at it. Stan felt another key moment approaching. He knew that overall she was his, at least for next time. He felt like he could safely take the risk, and it probably wouldn't put her off completely, but it might sway her towards him. She was drunk, but her mind was clear, and she still made sound decisions. However, he believed that her temptations were now at their maximum, and if her passion increased, it would be because she was drunk enough to allow herself to feel the pleasure of allowing her feelings and desires to finally have a decisive voice. "I'd like you to feel something," Stan said, gently but firmly, taking her right hand and placing it on his. She let him. Melissa felt like things weren't going according to her original plan, but if there was one thing that was on point, it was her decision-making process. Returning home, even if it was a physically comfortable place, felt like returning to a prison cell. A hotel room would seem like a sanctuary where at least she wouldn't be plunged into deep sadness. But that wouldn't necessarily make her happy, and it wouldn't bother her. Stan's momentum, as well as her rapidly growing trust in him, put her in a specific situation. She was aware of the clarity of her mind, but if she had any doubts, they were erased not only by the alcohol, but also by the rational realization that the change and excitement she desperately wanted could come much faster if she just went along with it. Flow. Stan won't hurt her. She could be vulnerable with him, and he piqued her curiosity to dare to be at least a little slutty. But most of all, the night now seemed like a kind of destiny and resolution. Even if she doesn't sleep with him, things will soon change for the better. He wouldn't leave, and he had her, just as she had him. Their next meeting might be anticlimactic compared to everything this night promised, but this meeting would take place, and they would begin to do what they had planned. Melissa exhaled, realizing that the prospect of the meeting ending would soon leave her disappointed and looking forward to at least one more day. She was free all weekend and could easily call her parents and ask them to look after Claire a little longer. They would be happy about this for their own selfish reasons because they adored their granddaughter. Shy and cautious, she felt that perhaps part of her nature was to blame for not standing up to her husband sooner, or at all, and making changes in her life. But she needed to live a little, and Stan represented the switch that she could flip that night, moving out of the darkness into the light. Having arousal, being wanted, and having fun to her, he represented all of that, and most importantly, liberation from a status quo that she might not have changed if she were sober and allowed fear to rule her. Stan, fueling her passion, making her ego feel good, and making her finally find the courage to rebel, not only worked, but now it seemed like it would lead to revolution. He placed her right hand on the fabric of his pants. "It's yours if you want it, and you alone can decide." Stan looked into her beautiful eyes, and even in the dim light she could see his handsome face, his eyes so alive and sparkling that they shone like stars in the night sky. All their attention, all their intensity, all their radiance at that moment seemed to Melissa to exist only in order to look at her. They arrived at his townhouse, and he waved to a neighbor walking along the sidewalk, but quickly stopped making eye contact. He was in a hurry to go home. He parked his truck in the middle of the double garage since there was no other car to share the space, and at times like this, he loved how much room there was to get in and out. He took her hand and led her into the open living room. From the garage, they walked past the laundry room and into the back of the house, next to the kitchen, which was one large space with a dining area, a breakfast bar, and a fairly spacious living room with a gas fireplace. Only the dining room and guest toilet were separate rooms, as well as the staircase to the upper floor. The blinds were closed, the curtains were drawn, and the lighting he left was not too dim, but not too bright, but warm, cozy, and inviting. Whether she was paying attention or not, he was planning to bring her here, and the preparations had already been made. "Do you need to go to the toilet?" he asked. She shook her head, looking around the living room, which looked like a bachelor's apartment, but with more taste and comfort. Everything looked clean, organized, and inviting to relax. He led her to a very low, comfortable three-seater sofa, dark beige in color, with a material that seemed very soft and comfortable to sit on. She placed her purse on the kitchen table and sat down in the middle seat, as she expected him to sit next to her. But first he went to the bar cabinet, took 2 glasses, and poured 3 fingers of vodka into each. He added ice to both, and then poured sweet tea to fill them to the brim. "I even put 2 lemon slices from a glass in the refrigerator and added 1 to each drink." She looked at him carefully and smiled. She knew that all this seductive preparation was in her honor, and now she truly realized how much he had hoped to invite her over on the first night, even if it meant he hoped to take her panties off. He sat down, not next to her, but opposite her on a sturdy coffee table, higher than the one at Starbucks, but still low. He placed 1 glass to his right, the other to his left. "Take whichever one you want and drink as much as you want. It's strong, so take your time, or don't drink it at all, but—" Melissa now knew not only that she wanted to submit to him, but that submitting to him was enjoyable and associated with pleasant sensations, even if she would initially resist. Very cute panties, practically the kind a modest schoolgirl would normally wear under her uniform, he asked, wanting a comment, although he knew the reasons. "They're comfortable, form-fitting, and I really wasn't planning on having sex tonight. Otherwise, I would have opted for a sexy black thong or some silky lace," she replied modestly, but with a conviction that again claimed her honor and hinted that his irresistibility and persuasiveness were also mixed with luck that she was now sitting on his sofa commando under her skirt. "A real lady, and I'm glad you're here for the right reasons. Otherwise, I wouldn't want you here if you didn't want me to." He leaned back a little, comfortably, took a sip from the glass to his right, smiled at her, and continued, "And I would like you to know that the everyday underwear that women wear, comfortable bikini panties with cute bows, sexy prints, and a bit lace, is the lingerie that turns me on the most. But feel free to wear whatever makes you feel sexy or whatever your mood is, and maybe sometimes I might have a request when we feel more comfortable together." "It sounds good. I love comfortable panties, but I also love to experiment." Her smile was bright, but shy because she felt like he had something to say, and she wasn't sure what exactly would happen next. But she was excited. Not wanting to lose momentum, but needing to clear up one more thing, Stan continued, "I'm going to ask you to do something for me, and like anything else, if you're not sure you want to do it, then no. Once we know each other's needs, limitations, and preferences, we just need to be open with each other about what the yes is, what the maybe is, and what the no is. So, if I ask for something and you don't like it or don't want it, let me know. I like to take charge and can be quite dominant, and I hope you like it, but always tell me if something is wrong." Melissa nodded, completely understanding, and replied with a smile, "Your commanding tone and the way you take charge turns me on, just like when you call me a good girl or talk dirty. I will definitely tell you if something is wrong, but actually I have always fantasized about a man who could guide my submissiveness with his confidence and dominant manner. Calling you sir is also hot, although I'm not used to it and may forget. I hope it's just stand outside the bedroom." She winked shyly and added, "What do you want me to do now that I'm sitting on your couch with my panties in your pocket?" Her gaze was playful. She was stating the obvious, but the anxiety of the unknown was noticeable, and she looked like she was about to get nervous, although her overall slightly drunken state still left her very playful and receptive. Stan grinned again in his confident and charming way and nodded, saying, "Yes, sir is for the bedroom only, and I know you're not a robot to use that continuously." Stan comes up in the bedroom too. I'm glad we're figuring this out because I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page about pushing buttons, especially yours, since I feel like I'll be pushing more." He chuckled at his hint, and she giggled with light blush. He took a deep breath and took a smooth sip from his glass, then looked at her, leaning forward a little. "I want you to put on a show for me while I drink." Melissa raised her left eyebrow and leaned back, processing the request. "Stan, I need you to take me." She sounded passionate, but the statement was also desperate and needy, and Stan ticked another box off the make her addicted list. Melissa started the evening by wearing a pair of innocent panties because she wasn't planning on having sex. She was in control most of the time, and it took a lot of skillful seduction on Stan's part for her to now end up on his couch, practically naked and moaning like a horny bitch. She came here because she surrendered to her needs, emotional and sexual, and expected sex after initially not wanting it. Stan hoped so. But for Stan, it was a big victory because he would soon take her to his bedroom, but on fantastic terms. Now he planned to make her beg. On the way upstairs, she stopped to grab her purse, and the only thing she was wearing was her skirt. She tried to take it off, but he asked to leave it on a little longer. Stan always had some kind of twisted plan. He asked her to go up the stairs and turn right through the first door off the landing. She did as she was told, and he whistled at her as she swayed with her skirt as she walked up the stairs. He could tell the alcohol was affecting her because her rise, while safe and precise, was a little uncoordinated, and he calculated that she was now perfectly drunk to remember every detail, but beyond being fully under control of yourself. But he knew that with the intensity of the sex that was about to happen, she wouldn't need to be rational but wild, and he planned to give her the wildest sex of her young life. The gaze turned into a furious kiss, their hands soon being all over each other, which led them to lie down on the bed. They had very passionate sex. "That was beautiful, Melissa. How are you feeling?" "It's as if tonight, after a very long time, a part of me came back from the dead and was reborn." She smiled, her eyes wet with happy tears, and she wiped them away and smiled quickly. Her face looked like it was filled with deeply peaceful bliss. They snuck under the covers, kissed each other tenderly, and just talked about everything and nothing. They took turns going into the bathroom, turning off the light, and going to bed. That night they had sex again. Then they slept soundly until the morning, and she woke up first, went to the kitchen, and prepared them a large breakfast in bed with coffee. They ate and had sex. After breakfast, they went to the pharmacy, and she swallowed Plan B and washed it down with water. They kissed furiously in the truck before she went to spend the day with her parents. She asked for one more night to have some private time, and Claire was glad to receive even more care from her grandparents. Melissa arrived at her home for the first time, feeling like a naughty princess back in her palace. She had chosen a cute, form-fitting dress and another bra and panty set, light blue to match her eyes, in the simple good girl style that Stan loved. She put her phone on charge and went to take a shower. After a very long time, her life unexpectedly and miraculously changed for the better, and she swore she owed Kristen another meal and a few spa packages. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click